Hi, welcome everyone. Very nice to have you all here. My name is Dora. I'm one of the organizers of Qesher, and you can also find here Sebastian, also under the name Qesher. It's the two of us who started this project, who run this project, and it's very nice to have you all join us today. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I know that a lot of regulars and members are joining us. Thank you for being here once again. And just for the sake of those who are joining us for the first time, I'll introduce ourselves very briefly. Kesher means connection in Hebrew, and our aim has been ever since we started this project to share information and stories and history of different Jewish communities from all over the world. So we hold Zoom presentations in which we invite speakers from different cities, different countries, and they share history, heritage, culture, and the present day situation of Jewish communities from all over the world. And of course, many of you know that other than our virtual tours or lectures of this sort, we also have our book club series, which grew out of these presentations. And we realized how many authors around us have wonderful books that also speak about Jewish diaspora, Jewish life around the world, how are different Jewish communities different or similar, or what are their experiences. So we're very happy to once again welcome you to our book club event. Today we're going to discuss The World Between, which was written by Zeeva Bukai, who I'm going to introduce to you very briefly, but of course, she will share about herself more as we speak. She is the author of The World Between and also of The Anatomy of Exile, which we also introduced in the past on our book club series. And we will share with you tomorrow in our follow-up presentation also the book club recording of this book and information about the Anatomy of Exile as well. It was also a wonderful presentation, and we were so happy to learn about it. Her fiction has appeared in Max Sweeney's Quarterly Concern, The Master's Review, and other journals. She has received honors, including a fellowship from the New York Center for Fiction and the Kurt Johnson Prose Award. And her work has been featured in several anthologies and in many different places. She holds an MFA from Brooklyn College, and she lives in Brooklyn with her family. And of course, I think we'll find out a bit more about her also during our conversation. So I want to welcome you, Zeeva. Thank you so much for being here with us once again and sharing about your new book, The World Between. So first of all, before I ask you any specific questions, I just want you to a bit share with the audience a little bit about this book. What is this book about? What inspired you to write it? Just, as a first glance of what we're going to discuss today.
Thank you so much, Dora and Sebastian, for having me here again. I'm thrilled to be on Kesha, and I love the idea that there are people from all over the world in this audience. It's really exciting to be able to speak to so many different people in our community from everywhere on the planet. I find that really exciting. And I'm glad the book is kind of getting out there to all of you. So The Anatomy of Exile is my second book. My
The
first,
world
I'm
between.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. The Anatomy of Exile is my first book. And The World Between is my second. And The World Between it's a much shorter book, but I think it packs a punch. And I was thinking about this today about being on Kesher and the fact that it's Yom HaShoah, and that this book is dedicated to my mother and my grandmother who spent the war years in Siberia. They were originally from Poland, Krosnevitz, Poland, and my grandfather and my grandmother kind of moved east, and then they were sort of picked up by the Russians and deported first to Orsk, where my mother was born. My grandmother was actually pregnant at the time, and they spent 5 years in a Siberian labor camp. My grandfather was drafted into the Soviet army immediately, and like I believe many of the men were, and this story, it is dedicated to them. It doesn't really have anything to do with their lives there, but the essence of what they went through, the few stories that my mother told me about being a child in an orphanage, basically what they called the children's home in the labor camp, um, were, she didn't tell me much. There were just a few details that she gave me that I kind of used and utilized in the book itself. The World Between is about a former Yiddish stage actress who, after the breakup of her marriage, goes back to her apartment in Tel Aviv, where she had shared the first few years of her married life with her husband, Max, who is a Yiddish playwright. When soon after she gets to the apartment in Tel Aviv, she finds herself at the Sisters of the Saint Joseph of the Apparition Hospice in Jaffa, Israel, run by a group of nuns, a sanatorium, basically. And she does not know why she's there or how she got there. I mean, she knows who brought her there, but she doesn't know why she is there. And the novel is basically her piecing together what happened to get her to this moment.
Thank you so much. There's like so much more in the novel, but we can unpack that little by little without, of course, giving too many spoilers for those
Right.
who haven't read the book. So maybe first I'll just ask you about the title, The World Between, because all throughout the book I was wondering about that, like what does that mean? And I felt like that it has a lot of meaning to it, both physical and spiritual, and maybe more. So just why
Yeah.
why you chose this title and what it means to you would
I
be my
think
next
that,
question.
thank you so much. I mean, I love that question. The title, for me, speaks to exactly what you said. It is both this emotional, physical, and spiritual aspect to the world between. What does it mean to be an immigrant? This is a woman who was born basically, uh, also betwixt and between. To be in a labor camp as a child, she's not born there, but she gets there as a young girl, with her friend Rothman, who is another character in the book. And that friendship, I guess we can talk about later. But the title, "The World Between," really comes from this Kabbalistic idea, honestly, from the idea of what happens to the soul when the soul dies and passes through the body. And there's this Kabbalistic story that a student of mine, when I was teaching at Brooklyn College, a student of mine who was a Hasidic student, told me. His father was a very distinguished professor in mathematics at Harvard University and also a great scholar of Kabbalah. And he told me that when a person dies, the Jewish soul rises into the ether between heaven and earth and shatters into hundreds of pieces. And it waits there for other pieces of Jewish soul to attach to it, so that these aspects of different souls now create one soul that will then be passed into a body, into a new body, right? Into a living person, a baby, an infant, right? At birth. And that story, I mean, this was told to me 25, 30 years ago. It is an image that I've always had, and it winds up finding its way into this novel. And so this idea of the world between is where the soul is, kind of remains before it is born into a new body. But it's also the idea of being an immigrant and what it means to straddle two worlds, which is a theme that I go back to over and over again in my work. As an immigrant myself, I was born in Israel. I came to the US when I was almost 4 years old. I went back to Israel when I was 18 and lived there for a few years. And it's been this peripatetic journey, kind of going back and forth, which I feel is very much a Jewish story. And so she is also someone at this point in her life, the world between, I feel like the sanitarium itself is the world between madness and sanity. And she is between those two things as well. So I hope I've answered that question a little
Yeah,
bit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was so interesting to hear this story of the souls. And now that you mentioned the sanitarium and also on the book cover we see a nun.
Yeah. Yes.
And so I was just curious. It's very unexpected, of course, in a Jewish theme book world to have
Right.
a nun on the cover, but also as a place where the whole novel takes place. I was wondering why you chose that place, that it's in Israel, it's in Jaffa, but it's
Hmm.
still run by nuns. It's very unique.
Right. Yes. I mean, one thing that I remember when I was living in Israel as a young adult, I would pass by the Collège de Frères, which was and still is, by the way, a boarding school for boys. And right next door was the St. Joseph of the Apparition, and it wasn't a hospice, it was actually the girls' boarding school. So you had the boys in one building, and right next door was the girls' building. And it was run by a group of nuns. And it was, I think they call it like the turret building in Jaffa because it does have these two turrets, almost like a little castle. And I remember being in Jaffa at the time, going up Yeffet Street, which is where it is. Like if you go past like the center of town and you keep walking up Yeffet Street, you will come across this place, which today is called Soho House. And it's become this very exclusive club in Yafo, and it is gorgeous. And we were allowed to go inside. I was in Israel in December. We went inside, and so much of it. I mean, I remember just looking through the doors, and they had like iron doors. And when it was opened, I remember just kind of seeing this small little garden, and then these very, very big wooden doors. And I never was able to go inside. And yet, what was astonishing to me was how this sense of place that I had imagined and put into this book felt so real to me when I was inside Soho House. The garden, I mean, they've got a bar there now, and it's very chic and all of that. But the essence of it, the tiled floors, the way the rooms are set out, the way the reception area is just like the nurses area that I had imagined in the book. So I was really glad to have gotten it mostly right, you know. And uh, and really it was a place of my own imagination, having seen the building but never having been inside when I was younger. um, just the whole, and it does have the name, the Sisters of the St. Joseph of the Apparition, and I just love that. And also the aspect, I don't know how people know, but I don't know how much they know that Jaffa is really a blended city. It is a city of Christians, Catholics, mostly Roman Catholics, and Greek Orthodox Church as well, Russian Orthodox Church. So, and Muslim and Jewish. And so you have this city that is very beautiful, right by the sea, ancient, really ancient. Everybody has conquered it. Literally, everybody has conquered Yafo, you know. And there's an enormous amount of history there, and I've always wanted to place a story there.
Now, when you spoke about it, it really reminded me of the Anatomy of Exile, where you also, I think, the whole
Yeah,
story starts with a place that you
that's
actually
right.
have been to, and the kind of the catalyzer or like the starter of the whole
Yeah.
story. And just for those who don't know this book, for me it was really special to read. I read The Anatomy of Exile last time we had the book club with you, and that speaks about your Syrian family or your Syrian
Right.
heritage from your father's side. And it was very special to now read your mother's side, which is the more
Yeah.
Ashkenazi, and how like if you read the two books together, kind of it even blends more of this variety of Israel that you are now speaking about. And now that we're speaking of places, and also because in Kesher we love to also take a look at the different places and how Jews live in these places. So in your book, I think I counted four places that are really dominant, but maybe
Hmm.
there's even more. But we have Poland, where it all starts from, and then Siberia, and then New York and Tel Aviv. And you mentioned a little bit about each of these places, but if you could share a bit more what these places represent to you, why you chose these places to be present in your book.
So I think Krosznewitz, Poland, was where my grandmother was from. Um, Her father was the butcher in town, and they were actually a pretty well-to-do family. I mean, middle class, but she would tell us the story of my great-grandmother's fur coat, and having this fur coat was a status symbol for the family. They were a family of 10 children. My grandmother was a twin. She was part of a twin. She and her brother were the only ones who survived. Her twin died, everybody else was killed in the war. So only she and my uncle, Mike, actually survived the war. My great grandparents were killed, and my grandfather's family also was from Krosznewitz, also was a twin who had married one of her sisters, not the twin sister, but one of her sisters. And so everything was very kind of enmeshed. These families would know each other, they would marry, they would, they were not cousins, they were not related, but they were definitely people who were part of the community. My grandmother told stories about after the war, which are also things that I've placed here. um, the idea that Jews were really not welcome in Poland after the war. My grandmother came back, and she came back with her two children. She had not seen my grandfather for 5 years, the entire war, and was sure that he was dead. And so all of these stories, she didn't talk much about Krosznewitz. I've never been there, but I wanted to recreate this place. I did a lot of research. Um, in terms of the Jewish community, there was a Jewish ghetto in Krosznewitz. There was also the Lodz ghetto, which was right next door. And I believe what happened was once they liquidated the Krosznewitz ghetto, that they were then placed into Lodz, and then after Lodz, taken into concentration camps, Auschwitz and other places. Um, the story of Siberia and the Jews of Poland, there's some literature on it, but not a lot. And again, this was a story that I really wanted to tell. Um, we have a lot of Holocaust stories about the camps and the Warsaw ghettos and other ghettos. We don't have a lot of stories about what happened to Jews in Siberia. I did watch a few videos for research. I did speak to my relatives. I had to remember, I mean, literally anybody who could have told me about this history is gone. They've all passed away quite a while ago. And so much of this was in my imagination. So much of this was based on stories that I grew up on, right? My grandmother would the one story my grandmother told over and over again was how they were starving. They were starving, and they were digging for potatoes. You'd have to plant potatoes in the spring and then hopefully have them for the winter. And she said she would dig out the potatoes They were fine when she dug them out of the ground, but by the time she got to her, to her where she was living, her little hut or whatever it was, they were frozen. And that was everything. This idea of being frozen was just kind of the metaphor for everything about that experience. My mother, again, was born in Orsk, and the first 5 years of her life, she saw my grandmother once a week. That was it. And so the idea of childhood war trauma was something that I really wanted to explore here. And I still want to explore it. Like this is, I'm working on something else now, and this same kind of theme of Siberia and what happens to young people when they go through these things, right? When they're in orphanages, when they don't have access to their parents or to a loving person. You know, the story that my mother told, there were two things that she remembered: hunger, and she lived there until 5 years old. And that sense of hunger was with her all the time. And getting her head shaved every week. And that was something, that idea of the matron coming, straight razor, this was not with an electric, a straight razor, and shaving the children's head every week. She told me they would stand in line in their underwear, shivering with cold, and get their heads shaved. My mother did not have a head of hair until after the age of 5. That again, that image is something that has really stayed with me. It crushes me when I think about it. And so elements of that make it into this book. I'm very interested in this idea of transforming family history into fiction, and how we do that in terms of craft, in terms of, what do you insert in the story, what becomes part of the story, and what do you leave out? And for me, I found in the writing of both books, because you're right, the first book deals with my father's Syrian background, um, and the second book deals with the Ashkenazi. And so I'm looking at these two sides of family history of, outside of my parents and my grandmother. I never met my grandfather. I met my step grandfather, but not my grandfather. And my grandparents from Syria, I didn't meet until I was well into adulthood, and they were quite elderly by that time. And I met them in Israel, finally, in the 1990s. So what I realized for me was that the most important thing was not factual truth. What was most important was the emotional truth. Let me get at that. And if I could do that, if I could recreate that emotional truth, then I felt that I was being true to their stories.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I read your book, and like you said, some of these stories are in there, but just to tell everyone that it's
It's
not
not,
written like this. It's like bits and pieces that like come up in her memory, in the main character's memory, and it was very different now to listen to you, like the
yeah.
actual background. And now that you said that your mother survived with just one uncle, it made me wonder if Rothman somehow represents that uncle, Rothman, the character from the book.
So interestingly enough, there are aspects of Rothman that remind me of my uncle, absolutely. And Max is very much like an acting teacher that I had that I'll tell you about in a minute. But in terms of my uncle, definitely a person who was a real survivor. I mean, this guy was a Starker. He was this person who was very scrappy, very, a scrounger, anything to survive, anything to survive. And so, yes, Rothman is definitely in some ways based on him. I mean, Rothman is a whole, Rothman came to me just a complete character. And would I say that he's really like my uncle? Just in terms of that sense of wanting to survive. But other than that, no, not at all. Not at all. The Max character. So the story is an epistolary novel. It's told in a letter to her husband Max, and as you said, it's fragmented. It's in bits and pieces. And I've said this before, but I had this image in my mind of history and memory being this huge plate, and that plate being dropped and shattering. And how do you piece your story, your life together again? What does that look like, those shattered pieces? And that's really this character. She is a former Yiddish stage actress, an accomplished actress. I had a lot of fun doing research on the Yiddish stage here in New York, and also on the history of the Habima Theater in Tel Aviv. And I studied theater when I lived in Israel. I first studied at Tel Aviv University in the drama department there, with a very famous, what they call a documentary theater director. Her name was Nola Chilton. She was part of the Living Theater here in New York City with Joseph Chaikin. And there was that whole history. And so I knew that history because I had lived some of it. After Tel Aviv University, I went to the Seminar Lekibbutzim, which was really a seminar for teachers, but they had a wonderful drama conservatory there. And I studied with many great teachers. One of them was Hanan Sneal, who for quite a while was the artistic director of the Habima Theater, and is still working today. He's 80 years old and he's still directing plays at Habima and the Camry, and he's quite an incredible person. And I also studied with Binyamin Semach. And Binyamin Semach was the brother of Natan Semach, who was one of the founders of the Habima Theater. And they had studied this group of Yiddish actors had studied with a disciple of Stanislavski, who was the mastermind behind the method acting, right? That everyone, here in America basically adopted. And they studied with a disciple of Stanislavski. They then left Russia because they could see the writing on the wall after the revolution. So in the early 20s, they are traveling around Europe, and then they come to Tel Aviv. And in Tel Aviv, they establish Habima. And one of the first plays that they perform is the Dibuk, which was first written by Ansky in Yiddish, and they translate it into Hebrew and perform it for a Hebrew-speaking audience I think it's the late 20s, right? Israel at that time is already, even though there's a lot of Yiddish being spoken, it is already adopting the Hebrew language. It's either the late 20s or early 30s that they do this, and they create, Habima becomes the national theater of Israel. Binyamin Semach, who is Natan Semach's brother, the troupe comes to America, and he decides to stay in America and he's a choreographer, basically. Choreographer and actor. And he is in America. He is part of the Yiddish Rialto, the Second Avenue theaters. There were about 20 of them on Second Avenue in the Lower East Side of Yiddish theater. And he is part of that. And then he moves to California, and he winds up choreographing movies in California. And he also works with Martha Graham. So here he is. He makes, a name for himself. He's not a huge name, but he does make a name for himself here in the Yiddish theater in America. In the 1970s, he returned, I think after the 73 war, he returns to Israel, and he begins teaching at the Seminar Lekibbutzim, and I have a class with him. And Martha Graham comes to Habima. This is, I think, in 1977 or 78. probably 78. She comes to Habima Theater and she performs there with her troupe. She's actually on stage, Martha Graham. This is like the last time that she performs. When I walk into the theater, like outside the entrance, I see Binyamin Semach in a black fedora, rakishly tilted on the side of his head, right? This black cape, and he's standing there with a cane next to his wife, who is this beautiful, statuesque woman who's like a head taller than he is. And that image of Binyamin Semach, who looks like the quintessential thespian, there he is, this actor, choreographer, a man of the theater. I thought, when I was writing this book, that's Max. And there was actually an image of Max looking like that outside of a Yiddish theater on Second Avenue in the book. And some of the research for the Yiddish theater, I mean, I based her on people like Celia Adler, who was considered the first lady of Yiddish theater, and Stella Adler, who became a very, very famous acting teacher. People like Marlon Brando, Al Pacino worked with her. Stella Adler and Celia Adler came from a very famous Yiddish theatrical family. Jacob Adler was considered a very serious actor. That was Stella Adler's and Celia Adler's father. He played Macbeth. He played the Yiddish Macbeth. He did besides Yiddish plays. He also other things that were translated. These very serious roles he played. So a lot of that research kind of floats into the story itself. And going back to the title, The World Between, this idea of this character who remains nameless throughout the novel, the idea of putting on different personas, living in a different skin, creating a new character is also the world between who you are, what you can possibly be, right? So everything, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, why you decided not to give her a name, which even though I when I read the book, I didn't find a name, but there was one moment when someone calls her a name, and I so
Right.
wanted her to have a name that I even
I
kept
know.
with that, and then you had to tell me no, but that's not her name. She's just mistakenly called. It's so rare not to have a name for a main character, that it was. I just found that if you want to
Yeah.
to that, like why you decided to never give her
So
one.
so I think she I think she's shattered. I think that's the person that we're seeing. This is a descent. This is not someone who is ascending, right? Coming out of this. This is someone who begins to spiral downward. The idea of not giving her a name, first of all, it's in the I character, right? So she's talking about what happened to me. This is what happened to me, right? Um, and I wanted this sense of not being on a solid footing, not being someone who has a core at this moment in life. Something terrible has happened to her, and she is trying to process all the things that have happened to her. And I think that her remaining nameless is again the world between, this idea of not having a solid footing on something. And she and the idea of putting on different personas. She is an actor first and foremost. She is an actor who will slip into the skin of someone else. And we see that in this story as well, in the present tense.
Yeah, and I think also the way you wrote the book, for me that was very special because there are so many novels where, people share the stories of their parents, either like really based on research or
Yeah.
or maybe not based on or maybe more emotional, but still like chronologically. But this story is written in a way that it's even the writing is shattered, like she's shattered, and the impact of all the terrible things that happened to her are
Yeah.
is it leaves her in this shattered state, and the book is like that too. So
Yeah,
it's a very
it's
special.
it's kaleidoscopic in the sense that you see all of these different shards. And I didn't want to write it in a way that's, oh, super depressed. I mean, she could be funny. She is flip. She is, all of these things. And I think what we get is a survivor, somebody who has survived all of this thing, but a specific thing occurs to her that I'm not going to give away. I don't want to spoil. But a specific thing occurs to her that reverberates, that kind of vibrates, bringing up all of these other things, you know. And and I've always wanted to write a book that was not linear, right? This sense of, because memory isn't linear, right? Memory doesn't run on one line. It runs in many different directions, and that was the sense that I wanted here.
Yeah, I think it really came across, and I just want to add that because like some of the topics you mentioned are very heavy, and of course everything related to the Shoah and Siberia, it's hard to read, but your book is not like that. I just want to tell it to those who haven't read it, that even though it mentions so many difficult experiences, but it still remains light, and maybe that's also another level of the world between.
Yeah,
And well, before I want to also allow some time for people to ask their questions, but before we go into that, do you want to read a little bit from the book so we can hear her voice
sure.
and have a sense of
Sure.
how it is?
I'm just going to read the first chapter, which is a page and a half. All the chapters are really, really short. Um, And I'll begin. My dear, by now Rothman has given you the news in his usual officious manner that I am under observation at the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Apparition Hospice in Jaffa, while this misunderstanding is being investigated. I hope he hasn't implied that I've been arrested or given the impression that I am incapacitated, or God forbid that you need to leave the comforts of our apartment in New York for Tel Aviv now that you've been apprised of the situation. Please, Liebchen, don't even consider it. You know how Rothman exaggerates. Besides, he has no idea how much you detest flying or how unsettled you get venturing out of our Upper West Side neighborhood, nor does he know how attached you are to Stein's newsstand on Broadway and 92nd Street, the only place on the West Side that still sells the Folksbane Gazette, along with those violet candies you like. And what about Zabar's? I've never seen whitefish salad or corned beef in any of the local shops or markets here. God knows there isn't a bagel to be had, not the kind you're used to. No, it's best you stay home. And please don't pay any attention to what Rothman says, because I have not, as he so eloquently put it, lost my marbles. At least the doctor treating me doesn't think so. Dr. S. is a well-respected physician in this institution. He has charged me to write this letter as part of what he calls my wellness plan. Corral your thoughts, he says, and then after a great puff on his meerschaum pipe, he points a fatherly figure at me and advises, tell your husband everything. He'll understand. Dr. S. often speaks in declarative sentences as a way to spur his patients to action. I admit my mind whips here and there, summoning up all manner of debris, but Dr. S. insists that I get the facts down on paper and state unequivocally that I am well attended to here. I will regain my strength and return home to you. Our lives will resume their natural course, which is to say, I will be myself again very soon.
Thank you so much. I think
Thank you.
it's really nice to hear how it's written, because it just really shows where it starts, the whole story.
Yeah.
So I want to allow people to, whoever has any questions that came up from the conversation or just in general to Zeeva, like please feel free to put it in the chat. I haven't seen yet any, so while we wait for that, I may ask you a few more. Um,
Sure.
just to give a few minutes for people to think. But I do encourage everyone to share your thoughts, your comments, your questions. We're all here for that. So yeah, one more thing that I was wondering about that we haven't spoken yet is the different relationships
Mm,
that she has with the characters. Like now you mentioned Dr. S, that hasn't come up yet in
yes.
our conversation, but also Rothman and also Max. Like even that, I would say that is almost like could be different shattered pieces of one person. That's just like a thought that comes
Right.
to me now that we are having
Um,
the conversation. But if you want to share anything about these connections, these relationships.
So Rothman is a childhood friend who basically both of them are deported to Siberia. Rothman with his sister, older sister, his parents were killed much earlier on in his life, and so he was brought up by his sister. And the and and Rothman is this character who is a survivor. He teaches her how to survive. They steal, they do anything that they absolutely have to do in order to survive. Rothman is, I would say, the love of her life. She loves Max. Max is her husband and she adores him. She meets Max much later. But Rothman is her first love, but he cannot give her what she needs and what she wants. And he withholds from her. He withholds that love from her, even though they are very, very close. Um, it is a relationship that she relies on. Rothman is the one who introduces her to Max. He knows what she needs. Um, and Max is also essentially a survivor. He's a playwright. He's a Yiddish playwright. He is from Germany. One of the scenes is from Kristallnacht, and again told from the point of view of a child um, whose mother goes out, and we're not sure what happens to her. And there are scenes there of where he is in a camp, um, and from that scene, he creates a specific play called Die Bloedam, the Blue Lady. And this is a momentous play in both his life and the narrator's life. Uh, they they live in their early life is spent in Israel, and after uh, a tremendously painful experience, they move to the United States. And from there, their relationship continues. And part of this book is really the delving into a marriage. It's an excavation of a marriage, really. And what happened where and why it happened and how she sees what happened between them. And so that marriage is also kind of a catalyst for what has happened to her here. And then there is Dr. S, who becomes a kind of lifeline. And what happens in this story is that many of these lifelines, Rothman, her husband, Dr. S, another patient that she meets in the sanatorium, they are threads that basically, you know, that she either has to let go of in her life or that leave her life. And so the book is really a lot about different types of losses: the loss of innocence in childhood, the loss of people that you love, um, things like that. So both of these characters, both of the, most especially Max and Rothman, I almost feel are like two sides of a coin in a sense, right? I think of like that Janus coin, right? Where one side, you see one side of the face, you see the other side of the face on the other. And I feel like between the two of them, that is love in her life, right?
Yeah.
And kind of those two, both difficult coins, I should say, difficult men, really. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard not to give things away,
Yeah, I know. And
because
I
it is
and
a very it's a very short novel, and it's a short novel. Somebody called it an epic novella. It really has that sense. My publisher decided to call it a novel because it does have that kind of epic quality. We're going through many, different continents, different histories, all of that. So
thank
yeah,
you so much. Yeah, it was really nice
sure.
to hear a bit about that.
Oh,
And in the meantime, we also received a few questions.
yes, we
The
have.
first one was, where can people get your book?
So you can get so I do there, it's an ebook and a regular hardcover book. Um, and you can get it on any of the sites. You can also go to your local, my distributor is both in the US and in Britain. So, and I think throughout Europe, basically. So if you want to go to your local bookstore, I believe that you can get it through your local bookstore as well. But you can get it on Amazon, bookshop.org, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, and any of those sites. And if you go onto my website, which I can put in the chat here,
And we will
just
also
Zeeva,
share it
yes,
tomorrow with
exactly,
everyone.
zeevabukai.com. You can find links to those books, those booksellers to buy the book.
Great.
I don't
Thank
know
Yeah,
if it's there.
Sorry, I think
yeah,
this
that's
is
okay. Someone asked here, I'm just looking.
yeah. Are
I
you
was
writing
really,
your books in English or in Hebrew?
so I write in English. I write in English. My Hebrew, I mean, I left when I was very young. And even though I went back and went to university, I don't feel the same, even though I speak Hebrew pretty well. But I don't feel like I have the capacity to write with the depth in Hebrew that I can in English. And that sense of the deep dive of stories that are really layered is part of how I write. And so I'm not sure that I could be as nuanced in Hebrew as I am in English,
Mm.
you
Thank
know.
you. Are there
And
going to be an audio version of the book, or is
We
that,
are
yeah,
we are working on that. We are working on that. What happens is I had my first book out, The Anatomy of Exile, which I did want to mention here, and I know this is an awful plug, but it did just win the National Jewish Book Award for debut fiction. Um, so
congratulations.
I
That's
I
so nice
can't,
to hear.
it's it's hard for me to process because it's been like a dream of mine, and the fact that it happened feels rather shocking. But because it's hard to get an audio deal for the second book if the audio hasn't sold enough for the first book. And so we are trying to find other places. Um, Thank you so much, Susan Kleinman, for that. Um, there are some other things here. Someone's asked, do you have
Yeah, yeah. I
information?
will I will read
Yeah, okay,
the
great, great.
questions.
Okay. So
There
I'm
was a
gonna leave
moment
that to
of
you. Yeah,
when
yeah, I'm
someone
gonna leave that to
unmuted
you.
and we got out of
But
it.
I'm hoping to get an audio deal. There is, I'm hoping to do that, and I'm thinking that I would like to read it, but I'm not sure. I mean, again, I'm not sure what I want for the audiobook. So my agent and I are working on that at this moment. But it is on ebook for anybody who's reading like on Kindle or another device. You can definitely do that. And it really
Wonderful.
is a beautiful little, I love the cover. It's small, it's kind of pocket size, it fits into a bag. It's, you know, um, travels well.
The next question is from David. Do you have any connection to present Yiddish theater? Do you still teach at Brooklyn College? And his son teaches film distribution at the Graduate School of Brooklyn College.
Oh, wonderful. I took some film classes at Brooklyn College when I was a graduate student there. I taught at Brooklyn College for many years, but actually haven't taught there for a really long time. In terms of my connection to the Yiddish theater, let's all cross our fingers here because the book was sent to the Folksbiene Theater in New York. I'm hoping that someone will be interested in adapting it. I would really love to see this as a play. I think it lends itself to that because this feels like one long monologue, like a one or two act play, probably one act, but yeah, that's as close as my Yiddish theater experience is at this moment.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Do you have Polish citizenship? That was the
I
next
do
one.
not. I do not have Polish citizenship. Um, I think I might be able to get Polish citizenship. I'm not quite sure. I haven't tried. I mean, I have a very I have relatives, like my husband's family is from Poland also, a different part of Poland. And his nephews have gotten Polish citizenship. I think one of them. Um, my grandmother's stories about returning were so difficult. I don't know how I feel about getting Polish citizenship. You know what I mean? I have, and no dispersions on anybody from Poland at all. But I don't know. I have my Israeli citizenship, which is not exactly, people are standing up and cheering these days. But you know, and my American citizenship. So, but I have thought about the Polish citizenship. I'm just not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we've actually had also other authors and people. It's a or speakers even. It's a
Hmm.
common story that people like have roots in Poland and then they try to go back and it just doesn't. It's just not what it was in the
Right.
these stories or
Yeah.
actually we our last book club, which was 2 weeks ago, was
Uh-huh.
also originated in Poland, and then there was a conversation also about that. So I just find it
Yeah.
interesting how this is a common theme among many different people of having Polish ancestry, and then these difficult layers after layers of
Yes.
experiences in the different
Experiences.
generations and going
Hmm.
back and trying to
Yeah.
find it. So makes perfect sense.
I think it's difficult. I think I remember being in Barcelona a few years ago and feeling this sense of kind of Jewish erasure, of where that whole just, communities that had disappeared a really long time ago, hundreds of years ago. And yeah, there's just that feeling of the sense of a world that was there and then it's completely gone. Uh, Again, is something that I like to write about too, but
Yeah, these are
yeah,
also not easy topics, and
right.
someone is actually asking what would be the advantage of having Polish citizenship.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to be in the EU, I guess that would be advantageous. But nowadays, I'm not sure that I would want to be in the EU either. So, you know, um, yeah.
Um, the next question is when will it be in paperback?
I don't think it's going to be in paperback because the book is so small. The distributor, it's only 177 pages. The distributor, or even less, the distributor decided that if it was going to be in paperback, it would just kind of disappear into, onto a bookshelf. And so they priced this, pretty cheaply so that it's sort of between a hardcover book and a paperback. Um, and so I think it's probably going to just stay like this.
Thank you. And I'll just have to comment on this last comment where Susan
Yeah,
says that people can only have two citizenship. I
just
actually
I've got them. Yeah,
know someone
yeah.
very closely who has five. So
Five.
just
Do they have five different passports? That's something.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
Sebastian right here.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Qesher
Wow. Wow.
team. Qesher
Uh-huh.
team.
Isn't
Among
that
among
something?
two of us, we have six citizenships.
Wow. 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 That's
Yes.
pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
but it depends on the country. So I don't know about the US. We
right.
US has American citizenship, so it really depends.
Right.
There are some countries who say that you cannot, like for example, the Netherlands doesn't allow a second one. So
Right. 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 Yeah,
many
you can only
Dutch
have
people who want to make Aliyah, they end up not making Aliyah because they are not allowed. They would have to drop the Dutch if they
right,
need
the
to.
Dutch citizenship. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think I've asked all the questions that came in the chat, I hope, but if someone still has something, and I just want to read another comment from Susan.
Good night.
JBC award is so well deserved.
Thank you.
And I don't know if Janice is the second time you unmute. I don't know if you want to ask something or it's just by accident. So maybe just by accident. So before we close up, I just want to tell everyone that we'll send out tomorrow the recording of this conversation. So you're welcome to rewatch it or share with others. We'll also send Zeeva's website. And we'll also share with you the last talk we had about the anatomy of exile. I don't know if you want to share just a few words about this book also.
Sure, sure. So, The Anatomy of Exile is about an Israeli family that comes to the US after the death of a beloved sister who dies tragically in what appears to be a terror attack, but is really a love affair with a Palestinian man that ends tragically. And the family gets to the U.S. and then the story jumps 5 years when a Palestinian family moves into the apartment upstairs, and the Israeli daughter falls in love with the Palestinian son. And the main character, Tamar, does everything in her power to destroy that relationship because she's terrified that history will repeat itself and that her daughter will be in danger. And this puts not just a strain, but it threatens her marriage to her husband Salim, who is from Syria and Jewish from Syria, and threatens the integrity of her family. And she needs to sort of like step outside of her own narrow thinking. Um, and yeah, the novel begins in 1967 and ends with the 1973 war. It begins after the Six-Day War and ends after the Yom Kippur War. It is a novel that I worked 10 years on. This one, The World Between, was much quicker, but that novel took quite a long time to develop because I was actually learning how to write a novel, writing that novel. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it was really wonderful to read both of these books and to present both of these books, and they're so different, but then there's something similar in them
Yeah.
still. And so thank you so much for sharing them with us. And of course, thank you everyone for being here today. Someone's asking if you're doing a book tour right now.
So I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to be reading at the Oak Park Synagogue on Sunday morning. If anybody's in Chicago, I would love to see you there. After that, I'm going to be at Sunday Salon, which is a kind of reading series in New York City at Von Bar in the Village, in Greenwich Village. I will also be in Rochester, if you can believe that. I will be in Rochester, I think June 3rd. And for anybody who's in Berkeley, California, or in Oakland or the Bay Area, I will be on May 3rd. I'll be at the Magnus Jewish Museum in Berkeley. for their Jewish Book and Arts Festival on May 3rd. And I'll be on a panel with Susan Blumberg-Casson and Shelley Sanders, two amazing writers. So I'm really excited to do that. But yeah,
Wonderful. Great. So I hope some of our audience will be able
I
to
would
see you
love
in
that.
person in some of these places. And
Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us and for your curiosity and questions. I see many people are writing in the chat that they are ready to
yeah.
order both of your books.
Oh, oh, thank you.
So
Feel free to reach out to me through my website if you have any questions about the books, or if you would like to invite me for a book club or anything else. I'd be happy to join. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Dora. It's been amazing.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing these books with us, and thank you everyone for joining. We'll share all this information tomorrow in a follow-up email. We wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and our next event will be on Thursday about Iraqi Babylonian Jews. It's
Hmm.
also going to be very exciting. So we hope you can join us then, and we wish you good reading if you
Yeah.
are ordering the books already. Thank you, Zeeva, and thank
Thank
you,
you so
everyone.
much, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a wonderful rest
Bye.
of the day.
You too.